Hello nerds, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maria and today is the interview advice video. Mega giant video. Because a reminder, I can't make money from YouTube, so I don't care to split this into like 10 different videos and monetize off of that. I'm just going to make one big video with all my advice, film it, get it over with. The people who will want to watch it and who will need to watch it will watch it. So I don't care if this is like 40 minutes or something. I'm making this video for all my friends, all the people out there who are in toxic workplaces and want to get out, who are looking for a new job, but it's a really tough market. I understand that, and you can watch my experience video about interviewing at a bunch of different companies. What I wanted to say in this introduction is that it's a really tough job market out there right now. There's a lot of ghost job postings, and there's an expectation for all these companies to basically not hire any junior engineers and only hire people who are perfect and senior engineers. I get it if you're not there yet, and I'm not there yet, so I will give you all of my tips that I used to find a new job. And my second point is that I don't want you to be so attached to the outcomes. I want you to practice every day and improve little by little, and over time you will become much better and you'll see your progress. So celebrate your efforts over your results. Okay, so first section of this video is how to actually get a job interview. How do you network? How do you get referrals? So I also wanted to acknowledge that I had an easier time getting interviews because I do have more well-known companies on my resume. It's not like I didn't work hard to get those companies, because I did. You can obviously do this too, but some people will not have the same experience that I did. So you'll have to work a bit harder to land interviews. And it's not like I got an interview for every job I applied for. That does not happen. So basically you have to work with what you currently have and what you can improve on. So for students, it's usually adding more projects to your resume, going to hackathons, networking, going to networking events. You can watch my internship interview videos or new grad diaries to see what I was doing to try to network and do that kind of thing. But for people who are currently in the industry, then the best way to get into a new job, of course, is through a referral. I don't think I've ever asked for a referral from my friends, but I have been asked many times by my friends or from random strangers. And I just want to say that people are more likely to give you a referral if you are nice to them sending messages, because sometimes some guys have been like, it felt like putting a gun to my head. They're like, give me a referral or else. And I'm like, okay, I don't know about that. Yes, it does take like 5 to 10 minutes to actually give someone a referral. But if you refer someone that you don't like, then you might have to work with them, which is what happened to one of my friends who referred this guy that she does not like. Like in real life, she does not like this guy. She referred him. He got into the company, and then she avoided going to work because he worked there. Do not do that to yourself either. So for applying to jobs, like cold applying, what should you be using? I was using the Chrome extension simplify.jobs, which is where you fill out your whole profile and answer all of those questions that you might be asked in a job application. And then through this Chrome extension, it will autofill most job applications for you. And they also have their own website where you can filter. I mean, they should work on their search. It's not that great yet, but they do have jobs that you can search for, and you can save different ones and see your like tracking, like you applied to these jobs, you got rejected from these ones. You can drag it to like interview or that you got an offer. It's like a Kanban style board, but I didn't really like that for tracking and I needed more data for that. So I kept my own tracker in Notion, and basically the columns were company name, recruiter name, because you will forget which recruiter is for which company, and what day we had our first recruiter call, and then whenever my interview is scheduled, who interviewed me, so I can add them on LinkedIn later or maybe ask them for feedback, and then like whatever question I got. I also had like a separate Notion page for all the interview questions I got. Also in this stage, when you're applying to things, you can apply to things in different states, in different countries, and just say that you're willing to relocate if that gives you more interview experience, because that's what I did. Also, a lot of my friends are having a really hard time to get interviews. The recommendation I always give them, you're one of a million people applying to a job. Recruiters cannot filter it out. They can't tell who a person is by seeing their resume. And mostly it's like AI reviewing resumes now. So the best way to get your actual face in front of a recruiter or in front of a hiring manager is to directly message them. I've had friends who have had a lot of great success by messaging people on Twitter, on LinkedIn, selling themselves a little bit, networking, and asking if they could do like a coffee chat with their manager or send them the resume or something like that. And it also helps the recruiters or the managers because they are looking to hire someone probably, or they will keep you in mind in like a month or two when they are looking for somebody, put yourself out there. Send 20 messages a week or whatever the maximum limit is on LinkedIn. Also, reply to random recruiters who are reaching out to you for interview practice. My philosophy was that companies don't care about me, so I'm just not going to care about them. Obviously, I don't want to waste the time of a small company like a 2-person startup, but if it's a bigger company and they have the resources, I don't really care. I mean, they keep bothering me and hounding me. They're like, knock knock, it's time for TikTok. I guess it is. Okay, now let's get into recruiter calls, which is something new that I experienced doing these interviews this time. Before, for interns or new grads, recruiters don't really care. They just look at resumes and then you're in or out. But for full-time offers, it's pretty important that they find someone who is correctly aligned with what the team wants. So the first call you'll have is usually with a recruiter. They're going to ask you different questions about your background. I would recommend having a blurb. Just have it, like I had it on Notion. I had one for like general companies and one for AI companies, just to say like, why do I want to work at an AI company? So I would give an introduction about myself, like a 1-minute pitch, and then say why I'm looking for a new job or why I'm interested in working at a startup instead of a big tech company, because they'll probably ask me that anyways. And then they're going to tell you about the interview process. You need to be taking notes. Take notes on your computer or in a notebook physically. I had all these tiny little notebooks that I had filled out with all these job processes, and these will not be posted online. And it will look bad if you have to keep messaging the recruiter and ask them, what was the process again? And they will be giving you hints probably to what the interviews are going to be like. So for some companies, they might say, oh, it's going to be a leak code style interview. You might be asked these types of questions. Or it might not be a leak code question, and it could be coding something that the company has solved for before. So you can use this information to prepare. And a recruiter might ask you to explain a technically hard project that you worked on. I would have a blurb of a project that you worked on, and you can explain it kind of high level and use some buzzwords, because recruiters aren't engineers, so they don't understand all the technicality. So just make sure that they can note down some buzzwords so that the hiring manager can be like, oh, okay, I get what they did. Also, because I'm on a visa, the first thing that I would always ask a company before doing the recruiter call, do you sponsor work visas? This is the visa I have. So can I interview here? Because one time I did a whole 30-minute chat with a recruiter where she quizzed me on like NoSQL versus SQL databases. When would you use this or that? And I was sweating, like physically sweating through my shirt. And at the end, she was like, oh, okay, last question. Can you work in the United States without a visa? And I was like, no, I actually need sponsorship. And she was like, okay, can't do that. Hangs up the call. Waste of time for both of us. Another really important thing is that a recruiter might ask you, what is the salary range that you are looking for? Do not answer this question first. You don't want to set yourself up for failure, right? They might have a higher range, and if you say a lower number, then they'll be like, oh, okay, perfect, and then they won't tell you, because some places they don't have to tell you what their range is, but in a lot of states right now in the US they do have to, and in California they do have to tell you. So I would ask them first, do you have a salary range you can share with me? And they might say between this number and that number. And then they'll ask you, is that okay with you? And you can say yes or no, because later on, once you get an offer, then you can negotiate. But just write down this number so you know what their range is. Also, one important thing I wanted to mention about recruiters is that you're not just going to have this one call with them. You're probably going to continue with them along on this process, and they will be the one who is championing for you. So you want to have a good relationship with them, be nice, be friendly, and if they like you, they will stick up for you and fight for you in the negotiations. Okay, now let's talk about interview prep. So this is probably the meatiest section of this video. If you have never studied for an interview and you're not familiar with data structures and algorithms, then I definitely recommend checking out my 2 videos that I made a few years ago about studying for software engineering interviews. But if it's not your first rodeo, then here's how I was studying for interviews. So first, I started off by taking 1 month to study a system design course. And I mentioned this in my experiences video because depending on your level, it might be more important and relevant for you to focus on system design and maybe less coding interviews. But at my level, it's still a lot of coding interviews, but you might have 1 or 2 system design or architecture type interviews. I also did this LeetCode Patterns course, which I recommend all the time. And then after that, I started doing the Grind 75, which is a bunch of LeetCode questions that you do over the course of however many weeks you have to prepare. So I set it to 8 weeks and was going through all those questions. And I also had a Notion page where I would type out the questions, like take notes there, so I could easily review those the night before I had an interview. Also, during my interview process, I was learning a bunch of things. Where am I weak at? Because during the interviews, maybe I'll make a mistake in something, or I wouldn't know something about the language I'm using, because I was usually coding in Python, and I don't normally code in Python in my job. I use Golang, but that's not very good for interviews. So I started reading the Elements of the Programming Interview in Python textbook. So I read through that once. Like, I would read it in my bed before I would go to sleep, and then I reread it and took notes on it. And in a Notion doc, I had a bunch of like notes on all the different data structures and the different algorithms, and then I would also include all of the answers to different coding questions, so I practiced typing it out. The problem with this book that I always had in the past was that they don't give many explanations for different code snippets. So then if I was struggling to understand a concept, I would paste it into ChatGPT and ask it to explain everything to me line by line. And that was so helpful, and I actually improved my Python skills so much, because then I was able to learn like when would you use enumerate or for each or a range loop, all these different things that are unique to Python, or like the time complexity of a specific function in Python, because it might be different in different languages, and some interviewers might ask you about specific things like that. It really helped me clean up my Python code instead of just having a bajillion loops, which I was doing in my first few interviews, which did not look good. Because you also want to be coding quickly and cleanly so they can see that you're a good programmer, I guess. Also, I fucked up one of my interviews because I used BFS instead of DFS. So memorize BFS and DFS in trees and graphs. Just know the code, like have it in your head, because a lot of the times it's clear when you should use one versus the other. And if you just have it like locked in your head, then you can easily code it out and like make the modifications you need for that specific question. Just have those ready to go. Also, luckily, I got less tree and graph questions this time around, but I did get a lot more heap and merging intervals types of questions this time, which is more fun for me because I feel like those are more elegant. Also, companies are trying to be different now and asking you questions like coding a game. So I'm not going to tell you which companies these are, but just for you to practice, I'm going to tell you some of the games that I had to make. Snake, poker with jokers as wildcards, Sudoku and checking if it's valid, and tic-tac-toe. Very weird. I did not enjoy those interviews mostly. The night before an interview, or you can do this a few days before, but I just didn't have much time. Go on their Glassdoor and read all of the interview reviews for that company. Sometimes you will find really juicy hints. So sometimes companies will make you sign NDAs, so you can't say specifically which type of question they ask you or like exact leak code number, but they can say, oh, I'll ask like a medium leak code question about min heaps. Oh, I had to build this type of app or something. So use that. Go to your good old friend ChatGPT. Say, okay, I'm going to be interviewing at X company tomorrow. These are some things that people said that they asked during the interview. Give me some sample questions that they might ask me, like for the coding interview or for system design. And you can also say, print out the code in Python for the answers, so you can see like what would it look like. So this was super helpful for a few companies for me. And some companies are really weird, because one of them is like some finance startup, and they ask everybody, even software engineers, to do a SQL interview for their first interview. I don't use SQL very much, and I kind of forgot all like the intricacies of it. So then I went to ChatGPT and I asked it, can you give me a crash course on SQL? And then I went through that and just read over, and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And I remembered different things, or like I learned a few new things. I took a few notes, and then I was able to do the interview. Because I did my system design course at the beginning of my studying, and usually system design is near the end and during on-sites, it was a few months in between that, so I kind of forgot some concepts. So then I asked ChatGPT to give me a crash course on system design, or what is different between this and that. You can definitely use AI to your advantage. I don't think I could have gotten through this whole interview process without good old ChatGPT. Oh, also a really fun thing that my friend came up with is to ask ChatGPT to play a game with you where it will give you a leak code question. So you can tell it, give me 10 different leak code medium questions, and I will tell you which pattern I would use to solve it. Because once you become good enough at leak coding and you know kind of all the different patterns that you can use to solve a question, you should start quizzing yourself if you know these patterns. So then ChatGPT can give you a question, and then you can be like, yeah, I would use BFS here, and then they'll tell you yes or no. and you can output like what would be the answer, and you'll be like, yeah, that's right, that's what I would have done, or something like that. You can obviously tweak this game to whatever you need to focus on, because when you're in the interview, the first thing you need to do is figure out which pattern you want to use. So basically every night or every morning before I had a coding interview, I would read over all the answers that I had from Grind 75, because that's a good mixture of different coding questions that I might get. Then I would read over any notes that I took from reading the company's Glassdoor for like what to expect in the interview. And lastly, I would memorize any new syntax for Python that I learned so that I could use it in the interview. Okay, now let's talk about behavioral interview preparation. So you might have behavioral interviews with managers in the on-site round or earlier on. It really depends. Or if you're interviewing at startups like I was, sometimes you're going to meet the CTO or the CEO for your first meeting, so you need to have this kind of stuff prepared. For behavioral interviews, they're probably going to ask you questions in the format, tell me about a time when you ... handled scope creep in a project, or those types of questions. You can obviously ask ChatGPT for some nice ones too, or I'll put some on the side of ones that I got that were interesting. I had a Notion page where I put down 5 different projects that I had worked on, or experiences they might have had working with someone in school or that kind of thing. So have those ready and basically write them in a rough format. Just write it out kind of as a story, put it in ChatGPT, get some nice buzzwords in there. You can edit it after. And then I want you to watch this video from the other YouTuber, A Life Engineered, his section on behavioral interviews. Follow his guidelines for this, and that really helped me. And you can also have multiple stories for different questions you might get. So think about like a few questions that you might get asked, and then make a story for that, and then a few more. So you're covered in all areas, and you can just easily be like, oh yes, this happened to me. Because sometimes it was a little bit difficult for me to think of a scenario to talk about before I had this whole page set up for me. I also want you to make sure that you have questions prepared to ask the hiring manager, because you want to know if you want to work there too, right? Things that you might want answered, like how is the on-call here? What's the diversity of the company? What's an interesting project your team has recently worked on? Things that are important to you. And think about, do I want to work with this person? Do I want this person to be my manager or my teammate? And when you're telling your stories, don't be arrogant, but do be impressive. Okay, now what to do when you're in a coding interview. I've talked about this acronym before, but ABCD. Ask questions, brainstorm, code, and then develop. This is what I was really messing up on in my first interviews, was that I was forgetting to ask clarifying questions. Make sure that you leave like 2 minutes to ask this in the interview, because that is like probably a check mark on the rubric for them, and I was messing that up initially. So make sure you do that, and then always state the brute force solution. Just whatever first comes to mind. Oh yeah, use 2 for loops, or use a tree instead of this. Like, say that bad solution, and they will also check that off, because I was also missing doing that. And then once I forced myself to do those 2 things, my interviews got way better, and I had a way more success in getting to the next rounds after that. And always be talking. This is something that I had to get better at over time, especially from when I was an intern. I was very nervous and I didn't know what to say. Now it just comes more natural to me, so that I can type out stuff and also say like, what am I doing at the same time, or what is my thought process, and asking them like, does this make sense to you? Like, I can keep going, and they're like, yep, sure, keep going, I get it. And another thing, you also want to sound confident in yourself. So that definitely comes from practice and preparing well for interviews. And I want you to picture these interviews as a fun thing. Don't be so scared of it. I know it's scary. Picture it as if you're doing a pair programming exercise with a really smart teammate. Talk to them and be like, yeah, I think we should do this approach. What are your thoughts on that? And kind of bounce off each other a little bit. Also, another thing that I kept forgetting to do is to state the time and space complexity. Even if an interviewer doesn't ask you, I'm pretty sure that's probably also on their rubric that you said it, so definitely say that. And then once you finish coding the question, you can go on to the develop step, where you talk about how would you improve the code now that you finished it, or how would you make it like production ready if this was like a production project. Or you can debug it as well. D can stand for debug if something is going wrong, which a lot of the times I would have to debug in interviews, but I would still end up having time to ask questions at the end. So definitely have some questions prepared for your interviewer, and just like with the behavioral hiring manager round, have some questions that you care about. Now I wanted to include a section specifically about how to deal with rejections. I don't think a lot of people talk about this, and a lot of people will never post on LinkedIn how many times they got rejected. It doesn't make you feel good, right? But what I want from you is for you to have a learning and a curious mindset, because this is a personality trait that a lot of people will look for, especially in interviews, because you will be new on the job, learning new things. And I don't want you to think of every failed interview as a wasted one, because you are learning and continuously improving. Look back at that interview and see where might you have gone wrong, and then you can grow and improve in that area. And you can also think about it like, I wouldn't have worked at this company if I didn't fail all these previous interviews. Rejection is redirection, right? And also don't forget that this is a numbers game. You just need to keep applying and keep working hard, because I used to tell people it's 50% hard work and 50% luck, but it's more like 90% luck right now and 10% hard work because of how effed up the market is. Another thing that I would also remind myself, and I had this on my Notion for like my job page Notion, was that the northern winds are what made the Vikings. You will be going through a lot of tough times. Pushing through them is what's going to make you a better person. And I felt like after I went through this whole interview process, I didn't think that I would feel this way, but I did feel like, wow, I learned a lot and I think I improved as an engineer. Once you do get a job, or even if you haven't gotten a job after a few months, think back to months ago, before you started preparing, before you started interviewing. Remind yourself about how far you have come, because I did not know all this stuff about system design or all this Python stuff. I think I really, really improved last year as an engineer, and also in my communication about my engineering work. So like I said in the introduction, don't go into interviews imagining yourself working there and thinking about the outcome. Just go in there, try your best, learn from your mistakes, and keep adapting your approach to interviews. Another thing you can also think about to make yourself feel better is that one of my friends, he works at a crypto company, and apparently they have a lot of North Korean spies applying for their company. So maybe if you get rejected from a company, they just think you're so good that you're a North Korean spy. Who knows? Sometimes you have to be a little bit delusional to get through this process. And to end this video, I wanted to talk about my process for negotiations. I watched this video, which is 40 minutes long, but amazing, and taught me everything I needed to know about negotiating, and I took a bunch of notes for it. So what I took away from it was that you should always negotiate up your highest offer first. So then you can use those numbers to negotiate your other offers. So in my experience video, I had 2 different offers, and I got one of them before the other, but a few days apart basically. So I was able to use them as leverage against each other, and I was also talking about how I'm going up for promotion at work. So this is like the salary I could be getting at my current job if I decide to stay there, and like how many stocks and that kind of thing. So you can negotiate not just the base pay, but also maybe a sign-on bonus, the equity that you have, number of vacation days. For me, I wanted to make sure that my base pay was a certain amount. So you should keep a few numbers in mind, like a fuck you number, which is a really like crazy astronomical number that you're like, wow, that's a lot of money. Then like a range for what you think would be your goal, and then like your bottom line, like what is the lowest you would be able to accept the offer at. And in my experience in negotiating, one of the companies tried to down level me to the role lower than what I had applied for, but then I persuaded them to up level me back to that original mid-level engineer role. That came with a different salary and everything too, so I had to like negotiate a little bit. They usually say you should be calling to negotiate, but a lot of people are a little bit scared with that. So what I was doing is I would initially email the recruiter, tell them why I want to negotiate my offer, like what do I bring to the table? Like I can onboard quickly because I know all these technologies that your company uses, or I have already this type of experience or that kind of thing. At the end of the email, I would say, can we schedule a call for this week? Here are some times that I'm available. And then on the phone, we would talk, and it's much easier to get your point across and like kind of have a script because you're just on the phone, so you can read something too. And it's more like personable. So that's where the recruiter comes back into your life, and it can help you and push for you to get the salary that you deserve. Because for me, my original salary for one of the companies was 20K less than what I negotiated up to. So I negotiated up 20K, and they were saying initially, oh, okay, if you negotiate up the base salary, we'll have to cut the equity. And I said, how about we don't do that? How about the equity stays the same and we increase the base salary to what I'm asking for? So they had to go up to the CFO and ask them, can we do this for this person? And here's all this information and the leverage that this person has and why we want them to work at this company. So I was able to get this offer. And it's kind of sad because one of my friends works at this company and does not make as much as the offer that I was getting. So that's also why you should try to move companies, because a lot of the times your base salary is going to be important whenever you get a new promotion, because I think usually they apply like a percentage increase of your base salary or of whatever RSUs or stock options or whatever that you had. It depends on the company, but I think that's usually how things go. And I also recommend watching Advice with Erin videos about negotiation and that kind of thing, because the language that she uses is very good for this type of situation. And yeah, always ask for more than you are thinking of, because sometimes the companies can do that. One of the companies, I was going to ask them for like number and then a 5k, like I was gonna be like this number and 5, but my friend was like, no, ask for 5 extra k, go up, like go keep asking for higher, and then they were able to hit that number. So if I had never asked, then I would not have gotten that number. Use your friends to help you, and then you can send screenshots of like, is this a good email to send? And then your friends might be really good at like wording and that kind of thing, like one of mine is. So then she helped me like type things out and like fight for myself when I got down leveled. So thank you to that friend. And yeah, this is my mega interview advice video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And you can always join my Discord server and ask more questions or for more advice. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!